Many of you have traveled far to get here. Some of you have struggled to get visas, and it's good to see you here today. I had a chance to meet a few of you a little while ago, and I hope that your travels here went well. And for those of you driving from the northern and southern suburbs of Cape Town this morning, I hope the traffic wasn't too bad. I would like to start by acknowledging our funders, Open Philanthropy, the D.G. Murray Trust, the South African Medical Research Council, the Department of Health, the Department of Social Development, the South African National Convention Bureau, Furut in Norway, the National Research Foundation, because without them this meeting would not be possible. The World Health Organization is also a co-sponsor of this meeting, and we welcome their various participants from WHO offices in Brazzaville, Kathmandu, Copenhagen, Geneva, and elsewhere. The conference is hosted by the Global Alcohol Policy Alliance, as you know, the South African Medical Research Council, the Department of Social Development, and the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance. It's been good to see some of you here who I met a few years ago in Dublin. In fact, it's been 3.5 years since we met in Dublin, in Ireland, on the eve of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the second time the conference has been held in the Southern Hemisphere, and the first time in Africa. And I believe it's timely that we're meeting now because there is increasing recognition of the need for concerted action to address the health and social issues related to alcohol use at global, regional, and national levels. At a global level, this was highlighted last year with the coming into being of the World Health Organization's Global Alcohol Action Plan for 2022 to 2030, which aims to boost the effective implementation of the global strategy to reduce the harmful use of alcohol as a public health priority and to significantly reduce morbidity and mortality due to alcohol consumption and associated social consequences. At a regional level, while it was good to see a lunchtime meeting of the Global Alcohol Action Plan at the African Health Ministers meeting in Botswana in August this year, the resolution coming out of that meeting fell far short of what was needed to really move the alcohol policy agenda forward in the African region. And in my own country, South Africa, there has been minimal progress at a national level in moving the alcohol policy agenda forward. And while there was promising signs of legislative reform in areas such as alcohol marketing, drink driving, and of alcohol availability, and in this province in reducing alcohol harms, none of these pieces of legislation have been enacted to date. My hope is that GAPC 2023 will be a catalyst for meaningful action at all these levels, local, regional, and national. And I wish you all a fruitful conference and an enjoyable stay here in my hometown, Cape Town. The city we are in has many names. Where the clouds come from is the translation of the name used by the Khoi and Sand people who were first to inhabit this area. And I think many of you saw Table Mountain covered in clouds this morning. So perhaps it's fitting, where the clouds come from. The Portuguese explorer Bartholomew Dias called this area the Cape of Storms in 1488. And if you were here a couple of weeks ago, you would have seen that. Kaap de Goede Hoop, the Cape of Good Hope, was the term used by the Dutch settlers who followed. Ikapa is the name given by the Xhosa people. Other names for Cape Town include Kaapstad by the Dutch, the fairest Cape, the mother city, and interestingly for this conference, the Tavern of the Seas, which highlights Cape Town's historical role as a prominent stopover and trading post for ships sailing around the southern tip of Africa. In closing, I was thinking about this. My two ancestors, Jacques Delporte and Ignare Mare, arrived here from France in 1688. But it's much more fitting that someone whose ancestors were here a long time before mine, Bradley van Sitters, properly opens you to this part of Africa. Unfortunately, he's running a bit late too, so we're going to slot him in later when he arrives. So now we're going to turn to our first two video opening welcome addresses. And the first is by Dr. Adelaide Onyango, who's the Director of Universal Health Coverage and Healthier Populations Cluster at the World Health Organization Afro office in Brazzaville. So over to Dr. Onyango.
Distinguished participants, dear colleagues, welcome to Africa. I should have liked to be shaking hands and saying hello in person, but other duties have kept me in Brazzaville. Let me begin by thanking the government of South Africa, the Global Alcohol Policy Alliance, the South African Medical Research Council, and the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance for co-hosting this conference. It is the first time that the conference is being held in Africa, where we are plagued with multiple issues that are responsible for the slow implementation of the global strategy to reduce the harmful use of alcohol. 21 of the 47 countries in the WHO African region have alcohol policies, but their enforcement is very weak. There is limited regulation on where and to whom alcohol can be sold, and this is reflected in the prolific sponsorship of sporting events and youth activities. Attempts to restrict marketing are undermined by online advertising. Interference by the alcohol industry in policy development processes is a familiar challenge. Finally, many countries struggle with the informal brewing, distilling, and sale of illicit alcohol. Coupled with these challenges, our public healthcare systems are ill-equipped for rehabilitation, and the service offered by private practitioners is very costly. On the positive side of the alcohol consumption issue, the region boasts 57.5% of adults as lifetime abstainers. Thanks to this group, there was an average reduction from 6.3 liters to 4.8 liters in per capita alcohol consumption between 2016 and 2019. On the negative side, per capita alcohol consumption among drinkers is increasing. Consequently, our region has the highest age-standardized alcohol attributable burden of disease and injury, with 70.6 deaths per 100,000 people, compared to the global average of 38.8 deaths per 100,000 people. Another concern is that about 1 in 5 young people aged 15 to 19 years consume alcohol with patterns of heavy episodic drinking. This is worrisome because Africa is home to the youngest population globally. Women are not spared. About 1 in 10 women of reproductive age drink alcohol, and 3% are heavy episodic drinkers. Our fetal alcohol syndrome is therefore estimated at 14.8 per 10,000 population. Reducing the harmful use of alcohol requires coordinated and wide-ranging collaboration among government sectors, communities, academia, the private sector, intergovernmental and civil society organizations. Member states in the African region recently endorsed the framework for implementing the Global Action Plan with the goal of significantly reducing morbidity, disability, and mortality due to alcohol consumption in the region by 2030. The framework outlines cost-effective priority interventions and actions such as increasing taxes on alcoholic beverages, enforcing bans on alcohol advertising and restricting alcohol availability, enforcing drink driving countermeasures, and securing access to screening, brief interventions, and treatment. The regional alliances that are co-hosting this conference and similar ones around the world have an important role to play in improving the implementation of high-impact alcohol policies. We count on you as civil society organizations to lobby for the adoption of evidence-based alcohol policies, plans, and strategies, to monitor industry activities, conflicts of interest, and interference in public health policy making, to promote community-based education on the harms of alcohol consumption, to assess community needs in vulnerable settings, and to conduct awareness campaigns on prevention and treatment interventions. In Africa, we have a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. It will take the concerted efforts of all the stakeholders gathered here to raise our children above the harms of alcohol to their bodies, their brains, their education, their social life, and our future. Let's therefore commit to ensuring that our countries achieve the objectives of the Global Action Plan 2022-2030. So, once again, welcome to Africa, and I wish you a most fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Onyengo. So the second video presentation is by Dr. Jerome Salomon, who's the Assistant Director General, Universal Health Coverage, Communicable and Non-Communicable Diseases at the World Health Organization in Geneva. Dr. Salomon.
Honorable Minister of Social Development, Ms. Lindiwe Zulu, honorable members of Parliament, Professor Sally Caswell, Professor Charles Parry, esteemed delegates, colleagues, and friends. It's my honor to welcome you to the 7th Global Alcohol Policy Conference, which the World Health Organization is pleased to co-sponsor for the 6th consecutive year. Together, you are a vital force for reducing the enormous global harm caused by alcohol consumption, which includes nearly 3 million deaths annually. Last year, the World Health Assembly adopted the Global Alcohol Action Plan 2022-2030. The plan highlights high-impact strategies and interventions which form the core for both the WHO Safer Technical Package and the WHO-led Safer Initiative. I want to extend my greetings to all those implementing Safer, with a special mention to our valued Safer partners from Uganda and Nepal. We are currently expanding Safer to 18 new countries in 3 regions. Ladies and gentlemen, we can only achieve our goals through a united front, including governments, intergovernmental organizations, UN entities, academia, and professional associations. In particular, civil society organizations play a crucial role. Your dedication, resilience, and unwavering commitment to the cause are the reason that we are able to stand together at this conference today. So, let's use this time to learn, collaborate, and inspire one another. As the champions you are, you have the power to shape policies, influence decision makers, and create a brighter, healthier future for all. Thank you very much.
Well, those were very inspiring words from our 2 colleagues at the World Health Organization. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite Professor Sally Caswell to join me up here. I'm sure most of you know her. Sally is the chair of the GAPA board and GAPA program committee, and she's from Massey University in New Zealand. So warm welcome to Sally Caswell.
Thank you, Charles. And it's wonderful to be here and to see the old faces and a lot of new faces as well. And it's a great privilege for me as chair of the board of the Global Alcohol Policy Alliance to welcome you here today. It feels like it's been a very long time coming, this conference. We planned for it to be quite soon after the meeting in Dublin, but of course, as Charles said, COVID got in the way. We have organized 2 GAPA virtual events in the meantime in 3 time zones, each of them, and these were well attended, but it is great to see you in person here today, and we're very happy that we're finally able to do so. Before I say more, I would like to acknowledge the passing of a colleague many of you will know personally, or know of his very valuable alcohol policy research work. Kip Kipri was cycling and met his instant death in a crash just a very few days ago. We will miss him both as a friend and as a colleague. I wonder if any of you are like me and sometimes wonder about the effort we are putting into this issue of alcohol harm, a very important issue, but perhaps feeling rather small in the context of the existential threat we're facing from the climate crisis, the potential threats from potential developments of artificial intelligence, and the ongoing horrors of war fed by the industrial military complex. But I believe that our analysis that we're undertaking in this microcosm, which is a failure to protect current and future citizens from the profit-seeking corporates, is one that applies in all of these areas, and that our work is in a small way a contribution to this bigger picture. We GAPC participants are a very diverse group. We come from very different cultures, many of us. But our shared goal is to work towards the reduction of alcohol harm and the reduction of inequities in relation to alcohol harm. So whether it's the increased harm related to the consumption of a litre of alcohol among poorer and more vulnerable people in high-income countries, or whether it's the difference related to the consumption of a litre of alcohol in low and middle income countries compared with high-income countries. These are inequities which are built into the way that the commercial interests are producing, marketing and retailing alcohol. And the industry is in fact targeting the consumers, new consumers in middle-income countries in order to increase their growth and their profits. So this position that we take as GAPA, which is to protect the development and implementation of effective policies, things that governments can do, free from the influence of commercial interests. This has guided the development of the program for the conference that we're about to enjoy. There's a focus on taxation, which is a win-win solution for governments, but not yet widely enough implemented. A focus on digital alcohol marketing, which, as you know, is one of the least well responded to policy areas by governments around the world, and providing increasing threats. And a high priority for the commercial interests to defend. And a plenary on the important issue of alcohol industry activities, the inherent conflict of interest, and potential government responses. But while we are all very aware of the problems that we face in this area, there is also some real cause for optimism. We see positive moves in the global environment. We see the Global Alcohol Action Plan being endorsed by the World Health Assembly last year. We see more resources being made available and more action being taken by WHO secretariats, both globally and regionally. And we're seeing significant input from philanthropic sources and innovative community action. So we cover all of these very welcome initiatives in the conference program. But while acknowledging these positive moves, GAPA remains committed to working towards a stronger response at the intergovernmental level. Hence the theme of the conference, People Before Profits, Building Momentum Towards a Framework Convention on Alcohol Control. A legally binding treaty is an appropriate way to support governments wanting to protect their citizens from alcohol harm. This is given the globalized activities of the commercial interests and the global network of trade and investment agreements which support these commercial interests. There is good evidence showing that the presence of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control has made a difference in protecting tobacco policies in relation to these investment treaties. And we need the same for alcohol. GAPA's goal is to work collaboratively with and strengthen and support our network of regional alcohol policy alliances. Currently 8, representing almost every region of the world, and all represented here today. It is to work collaboratively with our civil society partners, Movendi, NCD Alliance, and Vital Strategies, to name just 3. Thank you all for participating in GAPC. It's to work collaboratively with the research community and with the World Health Organization, and we appreciate your presence here at the conference. While we sometimes have different emphases, our overall mission is the same: to reduce alcohol harm. We believe the regional networks will continue to grow in strength, create a network of networks, and can make a difference which will reverberate at the global level. Hence, there's time in the conference for the regional networking, and also, for the first time, an Indigenous Peoples Caucus. Finally, I want to thank the local organising committee and the co-hosts and co-sponsors whom Charles has already named for making this conference possible, and my fellow program planners for their very hard work. We hope you find the conference valuable and that it will support our collaborative work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally, for those opening words. One of the things we have to do is to be flexible and nimble. So I've realized that working in Africa for the past 30 years. So we're going to do something different. I'm going to hand over to Adila now, who's going to run the second part of the first plenary. And then I'm going to come back with the minister, hopefully, and we will do the concluding presentation. So over to you, Adila, and then I'll be back to finish this first part off later. Thanks.
Good morning. And I just want to echo Sally and Charles's words. It's finally here. And we relieved that we've started. I've got a very easy task. I have to introduce 2 speakers to you this morning. And the first speaker is Ms. Bongiwe Ndondo. It's my pleasure to introduce her. I've known her for a long time. She is currently the SAPA South Africa chairperson, but she's also the CEO of the Hlanganisa Development Institute of Southern Africa. She is an activist, and I take guidance from her often. So it's my pleasure to introduce her and hear her speak on this issue. Thanks.
I thought this would happen. I thought it might happen. So let's see if we can get this right quickly. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, friends. I am extremely privileged to address this conference this morning. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Adela. Adela and I come a long way doing work around policy change. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to welcome you again after Charles' warm welcome to the 7th Global Alcohol Policy Conference. I'm honored to address you today as a fellow advocate for social change. Unfortunately, the honor to share my thoughts with you all are tinged with sadness because I also happen to be a woman who lives in a country ranked 6th globally in femicide rates. This identity will no doubt jaundice my perspective on how I view the issues that we're talking about today. The conference theme, Investing in People Before Profits, sets the stage for a critical exploration of the nexus between industry interests and building inclusive societies that are firmly rooted in upholding public good. Sorry. Sorry again, I thought. My apologies. I think I need your help. I'm just trying. Although in my address today, sorry about that, although in my address today I've been tasked with focusing on the intersection between alcohol and gender-based violence, a scourge that continues to erode our gains in pursuit of gender justice, I would like us to start by unpacking some of the global factors that make this such a complex issue. Globally, societies are governed through what we call nation states. However, although the nation state is the unit of account, most of society's challenges have a global outlook that transcends borders and even cultures. Sadly, at this point in our evolutionary journey, we do not yet have a framework or the tools that govern the regulation and regulate the activities of humanity at a global level. It may sound like a bit of an oxymoron, but in a globalized world, the concept of a global society, and therefore a global citizen, does not really exist. An attempt through institutions such as the UN and the World Trade Organization unfortunately falls short of the task because of inherent flaws in their design, in their configuration, in their history, and in their balance of power. Most, if not all, challenges confronting humanity today arise because of interests that extend their tentacles across geographies. In the context of alcohol, it is largely global corporates with economic interests beyond their areas of domicile. In the absence of a global governance system, the ability to regulate their interests differs between strong states and weaker states. Let me elaborate on this a little bit. In the event that a US domiciled business entity X tries to turn a profit there, the system has the capacity to regulate and the capability to enforce such regulations. When the same corporate extends its economic interest to Malawi, for instance, a different reality emerges. Even if Malawi literally copied the same regulation process and duplicated the institutions, its capacity to enforce will always be less robust. As a result, Entity X will invariably operate differently in Malawi as it will in the US. Another compounding reality is that the US will not insist that Entity X is governed in the same way in Malawi as it is in the US. Because it is a US corporation, the economic benefit to the US could be persuasive enough for the US to turn a blind eye to its ethical conduct in a different jurisdiction. This asymmetry that is caused by globalization makes formulation and enforcement of global codes of conduct very difficult, if not outright impossible. These challenges are magnified in the Global South, where multinational corporations use their resources and expertise to draw a curtain horse through weak policy jurisdictions. They go to great lengths to circumvent laws and exert influence over weaker nations. I therefore want to remind us, ladies and gentlemen, that we have been here before. We cannot forget the gains made in the fight against smoking, a dark period in our history when the power and influence of the tobacco industry seemed unsurmountable, when the industry employed aggressive tactics to thwart and derail legislative changes intended to safeguard the interests of public health. And yet, during our lifetimes, we have witnessed the implementation of tobacco control policies that have changed societal norms around smoking and decreased the burden of linked diseases. Today, as we speak, there is a war raging within the fossil fuel industry, where they are calling into question climate change science, where they commission research aimed at sowing doubt in the public's minds, where they aggressively lobby governments and policymakers to exert influence through coercion. The battle for the regulation of alcohol use must be seen in similar light. We are faced collectively with the responsibility to center humanity in the face of narrow commercial interests of a powerful minority. We know that corporates left to their own will maximize profits at the expense of all and sundry. In fact, globally, governments tend to play catch-up in regulation. This is currently playing out at the global level, where we are seeing the tech giants literally run rings around countries in the global north as they try to develop and implement appropriate regulatory frameworks. This challenge is tenfold in weaker states in the global south. So as we talk about alcohol and its link with gender-based violence, we must not lose sight of the complexity of the challenge and appreciate the nuances that it nests. The direct link between alcohol and gender-based violence, if I may come back to my topic this morning, is well documented, especially the link between alcohol and intimate partner violence. A study published in the South African Medical Journal revealed that nearly 70% of perpetrators of femicide had consumed alcohol before the tragic incident. Other research showed that men with problem of alcohol use were 3 times more likely to perpetuate intimate partner violence. In addition to this direct link, an indirect link also exists, where trends in alcohol advertising involve the exploitative use of women's bodies to sell products. This practice perpetuates harmful gender stereotype, and its normalization contributes to a culture where women are objectified for the pleasure of others. This further promotes gender-based violence. Why should we be concerned, you may ask? Firstly, globally, 5.3% of deaths, which translates to over 5 million deaths, are attributable to alcohol. These alcohol attributable deaths have a gender and socio-economic status dimension. Although alcohol-related deaths have historically been more prevalent amongst men than women, recent trends suggest a narrowing of this gap, with increasing rates of alcohol-related deaths among females. The problem is also heightened within the low socio-economic status bands. A study conducted in South Africa reported that 60% of alcohol attributable deaths occurred within the low socioeconomic status band. This association between alcohol attributable deaths, gender, and socioeconomic status has got to be understood in the context of an increase in alcohol use in the low-income countries by both men and women. Per capita consumption rates are on the increase in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia. Secondly, we are seeing an increase in investments by the alcohol industry in low-income countries. Looking at sub-Saharan Africa only, in 2023, Heineken announced a plan to invest over $258 million in a new brewery and maltery in South Africa. InBev, another one of the industry giants, spent over $250 million in a brewery in Nigeria in 2017. A few years later, spent over $180 million on a brewery in Mozambique. And just a few months ago, announced plans to invest over $320 million in South Africa. Now, why is all this significant? It is significant, firstly, because in spite of having an established link between alcohol attributable deaths, gender, and socioeconomic status, we are seeing an aggressive expansion of the industry into low-income countries. Notably, we are not seeing a corresponding attempt by these governments to curtail the social and health harm caused by alcohol. In fact, what we are seeing is an overstating of the industry's contribution to the economy and fiscus. This in spite of growing evidence that the cost of social harm outweighs the economic benefits. It is also significant because the exploitation of women is not a disservice to women, but to all of society. It undermines our collective dignity and impedes our journey towards building a more inclusive and equitable society that delivers for all its citizens. The question then is, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? The potency of policy in driving social change is unquestionable. Policy has been used with measures of success to address inequality and non-discrimination in minority groups. Firstly, we have to promulgate the correct policies. We have to enact the right laws. It starts with our laws and by implication our lawmakers. The industry knows this, which is why they are intentional about targeting lawmakers, which undue influence we have come to accept and normalize as lobbying. In the US, corporate lobbying budgets have increased close to 100-fold in the last 3 decades, a sure sign of how industries can be determined to influence political agendas in the process potentially undermining policy for public good. These budgets are used to hire lobbyists who sometimes come from the very public institutions tasked with regulations, sometimes in outright unethical practices. The global north certainly has more stringent alcohol control laws. Just looking at a few examples. Alcohol costs more in the global north due to higher taxes and the regulation of pricing. If you go to Europe, the Nordic countries, with the exception of Denmark, all of them with the exception of Denmark, have alcohol monopoly laws, where alcohol is sold only in government-controlled stores. This is aimed at curtailing the obscene profit motive from sale of alcohol. Looking at the US, in 1984, the minimum legal drinking age was shifted from 18 to 21 years. This policy shift alone resulted in reduced per capita consumption, reduced alcohol-related road fatalities, reduced binge drinking, reduced drug abuse, and indeed reduced gender-based violence. So we have a lot of cases from the global north that we can learn from a policy perspective. I wish to remind us that our lawmakers are us, that we are our lawmakers, the people we send to legislators, who are our advocates, who our advocacy efforts need to target the most. Perhaps even more than government, who should be enforcing what society has already agreed in the legislature. And to that point, I want to spend a bit of time looking at the role of regulators and how we need to strengthen them. One must start by underscoring the role of government as a referee in protecting citizens' interests, and in particular those impacted and with the least power. Most countries in the global north have adopted statutory regulations, supporting the thesis that regulation cannot be left to the industry, who continue to advocate for self-regulation. As we saw earlier, the conduct and behavior of the industry is determined by what regulations are in place and is devoid of any ethical standards. This is evident in how the same corporates behave differently in different geographies. In the global south, we often make the assumption that our regulators understand their role and have the capacity to deliver on their mandate. This is not always true. We have to be intentional in how we collectively work with regulators to enable them to perform their role. A good starting point is to ensure that the regulatory frameworks are relevant to our context. A copy and paste approach of institutions and processes denies us the opportunity to ground them in our reality. I therefore challenge the policy researchers amongst us to explore this further. We need to build the capacity of our regulators to perform. This includes individual skills and collective competency, including institutional efficacy. We have to resource them adequately. Many of our regulators are constrained in what they can do purely because of resourcing. I implore our government officials who are not here, I was hoping they would be here, to pay attention to this and also encourage some of us as civil society to continue to lobby government to allocate the necessary resources. We have to give them the potency they require. They must be able to impose penalties and enforce sanctions. They can't stop at just regulating. We have to enhance and defend their independence. And often when we talk about independence of regulators, we think about industry influence. But we must protect them from political influence too, because often that is where some of the problems come from. We must sharpen their understanding of conflict of interest. And I use the word sharpen because this is particularly important in the context of a manipulative industry that uses subtle ways of influencing and compromising them. And we must have zero tolerance for corruption. We must severely punish those that are corrupted and those that are corrupting. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to point out that at various points in our history, humanity has been faced with the challenge of balancing the influence of interest groups against those of the general public. At critical inflection points in our history, society has adopted policies that seek to protect the vulnerable from malignant interests of powerful and often influential interest groups. We stopped slavery. We gave the vote to women and people of color. We banned smoking in public spaces, and so on and so forth. We are faced with a similar challenge today. The link between alcohol and GBV is undeniable. It is clear that in the absence of appropriate laws and robust regulation, this link will remain unbroken. Our pursuit for gender equality must center alcohol regulation, and our collective responsibility to strengthen regulators must be met with commitment and thoughtfulness. We have an opportunity to shift society's relationship with alcohol through better policy and more robust regulation. But we must not stop there. We also have an opportunity to shift society's relationship with many other commercial products that cause health and social harm. We need to move away from our silos. We need to make those linkages and leverage the synergies. We need to move away from a global alcohol alliance, a tobacco control movement, a global warming caucus. We need to come together and close ranks in a global governance of commercial determinants of health. We are where we learn together and learn from each other, where we celebrate each other's wins, and we re-strategize together when we fail. This is an Aluta Continua moment. Let us seize it because together we will be much stronger. Thank you very much.
thank you, Bongi, for a very powerful reminder of power and the differences between the North and the South. The fact that industry are regulated differently in the North, in the South, and for the call, in fact, the call to all of us. I think the last part of a call is up for a big discussion, but the call for us to act, and particularly, and I want to acknowledge that the Minister of Social Development has arrived and is in the room, and Charles will appropriately introduce her, but the call to government to take note of evidence and to use that to influence how they make laws that protect people and promote health. So I want to invite our second speaker, Dr. Beatrice Lobi-Secretan, and she will speak to us on the issue of the benefits of the reduction of consumption of alcoholic beverages and its impact in reducing cancer risk. Thank you. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good morning. Is there a switch? Do I have a switch to change the slides? Okay. Let's just try. Yes, okay. Okay, good morning. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me the great honor to speak at the 7th Global Alcohol Policy Conference here in Cape Town, South Africa. My name is Beatrice Lobi-Secretan. I'm head of the IARC Handbooks of Cancer Prevention Program at the International Agency for Research on Cancer in Lyon, France. Yeah. Is that better? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So my talk today will be focusing on alcohol and cancer, and I would say the subtitle of my talk would be The Risks of Drinking and the Benefits of Quitting. So IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, is what we call the cancer research arm of WHO, located in Lyon. There are 27 participating members at this time in 2023. So the outline of my talk will be in two parts. First, the risks of alcohol drinking, so highlighting the carcinogenicity of alcoholic beverages and the burden of alcohol-related cancers worldwide. And then on the benefits of quitting, I'll be presenting the IARC Handbooks of Cancer Prevention Program, and more specifically the volume 20 on alcohol control, done in collaboration with WHO Europe. So the carcinogenicity of alcohol has been known since long. Thanks to the program of the IARC monographs, in 1987, it was already established that consumption of alcohol is carcinogenic to humans, IARC monographs Group 1 classification. In the following updates, in 2010 and 2012, it was established that ethanol in alcoholic beverages is carcinogenic to humans Group 1, and that it's actually the acetaldehyde which is associated with the consumption of alcoholic beverages which is carcinogenic to humans Group 1, and I'll explain those terms. So consumption of alcoholic beverages causes 7 types of cancer, namely cancers of the oral cavity, of the pharynx, of the larynx, of the esophagus, of the liver, of the colorectum, and last but not least, of breast. So there are a few questions that come up to my mind when I hear alcoholic beverages causes cancer. Is it all types of alcohol, of alcoholic beverages? Yes, indeed. In fact, all types of alcoholic beverages and alcohol, as in also unrecorded and home-brewed alcohol. all these beverages can cause cancer. And what causes cancer is, in the alcohol is the ethanol, the main constituent of alcohol. And one unit of measure of consumption corresponds to 10 to 12 grams of pure alcohol. So one drink, you see the different size of the glasses, corresponds to 10 to 12 grams of pure alcohol. It's considered one unit of measure of drinking. So why did I explain about alcohol and ethanol and acetaldehyde? Ethanol is a toxic component of alcoholic beverages. In some populations, and up to 30% in some regions in Southeast Asia, people have a deficiency in the enzyme that metabolizes the ethanol, and there's only a 10% activity of the enzyme, which means that the acetaldehyde accumulates in the body, and these people have a much higher risk of developing cancer related to alcohol. The other important part of this slide is to show that the risk of cancer related to alcohol increases already at low amount consumed. This is the graph of the increasing risk of breast cancer, increasing your risk of cancer, related to alcohol. And another very important element about the carcinogenicity of alcohol is its synergy with tobacco. We know that tobacco smoking and alcohol drinking often go together. And you can see there's a strong correlation between the amount of alcohol consumed in grams per day and the percentage of people who ever smoke in this category. The more people drink, the more they are likely to smoke. The more people smoke, the more they are likely to drink. And this correlation is particularly harmful because the risk of cancer for people who both drink and smoke is higher than additive, is higher than the risk of cancer from smoking plus the risk of cancer from drinking. And this is true for all the cancers from the head and neck, so the oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, and esophagus. This is true for men and for women. This is true at all ages, whether you're below 45, between 45 and 60, or higher than 60 years old. And this is true for all the regions, based on the available studies. So now, what is the global cancer burden due to alcohol consumption? So you can see that more than half of the number of cases are in Asia, with also a very large proportion in Europe and smaller fraction in the other continents, in North America, Africa, and other regions. And the highest population attributable fraction is observed in the Western Pacific region, followed by the European region, and followed by Southeastern region from the WHO region. An important message here I want to convey is that it's not just heavy alcohol drinking that causes cancer. Even moderate alcohol consumption can cause cancer, particularly in women. On the left graph, you can see for both sexes, with different shading based on the amount of alcohol, you can see to the far left that almost 20% of the cancer deaths are due to moderate consumption of alcohol. And this proportion is actually higher in women and is more or less similar in all the different WHO regions. Now, among all the cancers attributable to alcohol, which one are most prevalent? So cancer of the esophagus represents about 30% of all alcohol-related cancers, followed by cancers of the colorectum, of the liver, of the breast, of the oral cavity, pharynx, and larynx. you can see that 3 organ sites represent almost 3/4 of the all alcohol-related cancers. But this fraction depends on the Human Development Index of the country. For example, in very high HDI countries, the cancers most frequently attributable to alcohol is cancer of the colorectum. In the countries with the medium HDI, it's the cancer of the oral cavity, which is most prevalent due to alcohol. And in countries of low HDI, it's the cancer of the esophagus. So probably there are some interactions with other factors, such as tobacco smoking, as I mentioned earlier, smokeless tobacco chewing, particularly in Southeast Asia, and maybe some other factors. Okay, I'll now switch gear and move on to the second part of my talk, which will be about the benefits of quitting drinking, and namely on the IARC Handbooks of Cancer Prevention Program in Volume 20. So the IARC Handbooks program evaluates intervention and strategies that aim to reduce cancer incidence or mortality. To do this, we convene a working group of international independent scientists with different expertise, which are convened into a working group. And the working group performs comprehensive reviews and consensus evaluations of the interventions on the review. These evaluations are then taken up by national and international health agencies to develop evidence-based interventions and policy recommendations for reducing cancer risk at the population level. The topics that are covered by the IARC handbooks are threefold. We review primary preventions at the individual level, such as clinical interventions and personal actions. We review primary prevention interventions at the population level, such as taxation and pricing, availability and ban, which is particularly of focus today. And we review interventions of secondary prevention, such as screening and early diagnosis. The IARC's process of reviewing and making the evaluations follows the principle of a systematic review process. And without getting into each of those steps, this is a very rigorous, systematic, and transparent process which we used for all evaluations performed in the IARC handbooks. In convening a meeting to make the review and evaluation, we have different types of participants. The most important are the working group members, which are independent international scientists that we select on publication records and who are without a conflict of interest. Similarly, knowledgeable scientists with a conflict of interest may be invited as invited specialists, but they refrain from writing certain types of text and refrain from the final evaluation process. We also invite representatives of national agencies or international health agencies, and observers can apply to a call for observers. This whole working group is coordinated by the IARC Secretariat, who provides scientific expertise, administration, documentation, and publication. Noting that the IARC Secretariat also includes members from WHO. So, the IARC Handbook Volume 20 on alcohol control. The whole conversation with WHO started in 2020 when there was a strong interest in the IARC program developing a handbook on alcohol control. And there was also strong interest from the European Commission and from French government that we do such handbook. The program had done previously a similar series on tobacco control, and including 4 volumes. The first one being on quitting smoking, that is whether we have a reversal of risk upon quitting. And after having written the methods for evaluating the policies, there were 2 volumes on smoke-free policies and on taxation and pricing. So we wanted to have a similar structure for our volume 20 on alcohol control. So the first time was to review the evidence that the reversal of risk upon reduction or cessation of alcohol consumption. The first part is highlighted here on the right-hand side of the slide, where we want to evaluate whether reducing alcohol use would reduce the incidence of those cancers that are due to alcohol, namely cancers of the oral cavity, larynx, pharynx, esophagus, colon, liver, and breast. And in the second part, we'll be evaluating interventions which have the potential to reduce the consumption of alcohol. And in part 2 together, will allow us to evaluate how interventions can be effective due to alcohol consumption. So most of you are aware of the determinants of consumption, but we thought in this volume it was important to also review the determinant of reduction of cessation. Why, if we know why people quit or what would make people quit, then it's more, it's easier to target this population with the right messages. So people may quit to improve or preserve their health, or they may quit when they already start feeling sick and they feel that alcohol is not good for them. We have seen the interaction with smoking, and individuals who do not smoke are more likely to quit than individuals who smoke. There is also a strong social dimension in drinking. If your friends stop drinking, you're more likely to stop drinking. There's some sort of informal social control of drinking. There are also factors such as social role transition. If one in marriages or in the cohabiting relationship or becoming a parent increases the likelihood of someone quitting drinking. There are also some religious factors, such as periods of abstinence, where people may stop for a while and then start again. And then, of course, the dimension of affordability and accessibility. This is a little complicated time, but this is just to show you the type of studies that we have reviewed, of studies that have assessed the reduction or the cessation of alcohol consumption in relation to reducing the risk of cancer. For each of the cancer sites provided, we looked at either reduction of alcohol consumption, cessation of alcohol consumption, and then the duration of cessation, because the longer you quit, the more you reduce your risk. One of the challenges of those studies was that most of the studies looked at former drinking compared to never drinking. So the working group had to make the comparison of former drinking compared to current drinking to see whether there was a reduction in risk. The other challenge was that the interaction with smoking, which I already mentioned, and there could be some residual confounding, and the fact that for some organ sites, such as the breast and the colon, the risk is observed at the higher level of consumption, and ceasing a moderate consumption may not be easy to observe a reduction in risk. So all these studies were reviewed and critically assessed by the working group, who then made an assessment of the strength of the evidence, whether reducing or quitting drinking reduced the risk at the different cancers. And the evidence can be classified into various categories of either sufficient evidence if the cancer preventive association between intervention being reducing or quitting drinking and the organ cancer is established. There's limited evidence if the association is plausible. There is inadequate evidence if no conclusion can be drawn on the association, and there may be evidence suggesting a lack of effect. And this is a very sad slide. I was hoping that I would be able to share the results with you today, but unfortunately the article that has just been accepted is not published yet. So the results are under embargo. So please follow us on our website, IARC Handbooks, and we'll release the results as soon as they are available in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is a very complicated diagram that shows the effect of alcohol in your body and how complicated, even though at the beginning I explained that it's the ethanol that is carcinogenic and is linked to acetaldehyde. And you can see that it has many, many effects in the whole body. So part of the working group also looked at which biological mechanisms are involved in causing cancer and which of those are reversible and would lead to a reduction in risk of cancer. And on the right, you'll have all the different mechanisms that have been reviewed and evaluated by the working group. And with this, I would like to acknowledge the IARC Handbooks team and the funding of the IARC Handbooks program. And of course, I want to specifically acknowledge my colleagues from WHO Europe, with whom we have started the collaboration and which is now growing and developing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for talking about the issue that we often don't talk about, cancer. In the world of cancer, they talk about it, but in the world of alcohol, sometimes that's absent. I think the work that you've just presented would offer some powerful evidence for us to work as researchers, but particularly as practitioners and as advocates, as we get our government to begin to look at the way alcohol impacts on people's health and why they need to introduce evidence-based policies. I hope that our minister has taken note of some of the issues. Both speakers have spoken about the issue on conflict of interest. And at this point, we would want to call on the South African government to stick to their decision of 2010 to not engage with the alcohol industry as direct partners. I want to call on Charles that would now introduce the minister and hand over.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Thank you. While the minister's coming, she's going to join us in the middle. I will be handing over some gifts to our previous speakers. Thank you, Minister. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the final speaker for this opening session, the Honourable Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu. And I've got a short bio I'm going to look at here. Very short. Find my glasses. So, Ms. Lindiwe Zulu is the current Minister of Social Development in the 6th administration of the Government of the Republic of South Africa. She's a member of the National Executive Committee and chairperson of the African National Congress's Subcommittee on International Relations. She obtained a master's degree in journalism in Russia, and after her studies in Moscow, she joined the Liberation Army Umkhonto we Sizwe, and later joined the Pan-African Women's Organization PAWO in Angola, where she was appointed the coordinator of the Communications Committee. She's held several communications positions. Let's move on here. She said I must be short. And in 2014, Ms. Zulu was appointed the Minister of Small Business Development and the Minister of Social Development after the 2019 National General Election. Minister, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I asked him to be short because if he's going to read the whole history, it's going to take the whole day. And I normally say those who have an interest, they can just simply Google it. You'll find the rest of my life somewhere there. A very good morning to you, Program Director in particular, and a very good morning to Prof. Charles Perry, Medical Research Council. I didn't see anyone from the province. I don't want to be against protocol and not greet people who are from the Western Cape Provincial Government. I'm hoping that they are also here. Director for the World Health Organization, Department of Mental Health and Substance Use, Dr. Devorah Castell. WHO Coordinator for Alcohol, Drugs and Addictive Behavior, Dr. Vladimir Bosniak, I must pronounce it properly. Academics, senior officials and UN institutions working on alcohol policy, alcohol epidemiology, substance abuse prevention and treatment, heads of NGOs working on non-communicable diseases. But also I'd like to, when I walked in, I think it was Bongi who was speaking. Thank you very much. I caught a few I caught a few lessons from you, which I think are very critical. One of which you said we must learn together, strategize together. And I think that this is not something just for us who are in the hall today who are supposed to strategize together, learn from each other. It is also for our communities. It is also for our street-to-street, community-to-community, because this is something that we are talking about here. It's something that has got a terrible and negative impact, particularly on our communities. I also wish to thank my department being here. We are here in full force. We have the acting DG of the Department of Social Development, but also we've got the unit particularly responsible for substance abuse as led by Chief Director Caesar. And I think many of you must have met her by now. You have been working with her. But also we have from the department, from the communications unit, we have Lumga, who is also leading, I must say, leading also on DSD TV, not DSD, not the other, our own DSD TV. So you can be able to go into our own DSD TV and begin to see what exactly we do as a Department of Social Development. I just wish to thank everyone from government who's also been able to come here and join, because this is a platform where we are supposed to listen. I saw some people standing up there with some placards. Unfortunately, I couldn't read them. Are they still there? All right, yes, yes. Thank you very much. I saw a little bit of you, so I wanted to see what is there. I hear you, and that is the message. Pass the Liquor Amendment Bill now. That's the message. And from the, and all other government people who are here, take note of what they have brought us here. It's a message, and I think it's a message that is positive. I think it's a message that says to us we must listen when you stand up to talk to us. Thank you very much. I do want to thank you first and foremost for giving me this opportunity and inviting me to the 7th Global Alcohol Policy Conference, which is hosted on the southern tip of the African continent, the Republic of South Africa. In fact, when I was looking at your program, I thought it's looking good. It's also showing people where exactly we are and what Cape Town is about. It's also encouraging people to do some tourism while they are here. Thank you very much for that. So under the theme, investing in people before profits, building momentum towards the Framework Convention on Alcohol Control, this is a global occasion. It's not only about bringing together humanity from different parts of the world. Most importantly, the occasion presents a rare opportunity to reflect, deliberate, exchange views and policy positions on alcohol and its rippling effects, particularly in our society. I was told that there's about 52 countries here, which is quite impressive, because if I'm not mistaken, we've got about 195 countries in the world. I hope I'm right in that. So, talking about South Africa, representing government here, I need to talk about alcohol usage in South Africa. Hosting this conference, we acknowledge that alcohol is most widely used psychoactive substance in the country, bringing with it socio-economic burden on the health and well-being of those who abuse it. In 2011, the World Health Organization revealed that South Africa is one of the 10 alcohol-consuming countries, and this is fact. Alcohol, therefore, remains an important primary substance of use among people accessing drug treatment centers in the country, ranging from 9% and 31% in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces between the months of January to June 2021. The alcohol substance is widely available consumption, and the South African Medical Research Council raised concerning findings that there is a liquor outlet for every 190 persons in South Africa. This is one of our biggest challenges. In fact, what is more disturbing, if you were to look at where exactly are these outlets that we are talking about, most of these outlets are amongst our communities, black community, as a matter of fact. These outlets are out there, and one of the issues that we have to take very seriously, and as a department, we've also taken it very seriously, is to engage and ensure that there is a reduction of these outlets, particularly within our communities. The prevalence of harmful alcohol use is approximately 70% of all alcohol consumed, and it is malt or sorghum beer, which constitutes up to 30% amongst certain groups. And I think research continues to assist us, and I heard you, Bongi, talking about the importance of research. Heavy episodic alcohol abuse remains a common concern for us, as it impacts unpleasantly on the living conditions of many South Africans, especially the vulnerable women and children who are often victims of gender-based violence and femicide. Physical, sexual, emotional, and economic violence and abuse are reportedly the types of violence directed at women and children. It is a relief to realize that from the conference order of proceedings comprise plenaries which focus on gender-based violence and alcohol pricing policies, regulating digital marketing of alcohol, disrupting the impacts of conflicts of interest, and new initiatives in promoting impactful policies and reducing industry influence. Upon conclusion of this conference, we expect nothing except informed and well-researched opinions, as these plenaries will be led by some of the world's leading researchers, activists, and scientists who have descended on South Africa, and particularly in Cape Town. And Program Director, may I remind us, in fact, that in terms of the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, UNODC, people living in rural areas of the country, in particular those with lower socioeconomic status, have higher prevalence of heavy episodic drinking. Greater volumes of alcohol consumption and its higher frequency has been documented among people who consume alcohol at licensed premises compared to those who drink at off-licensed premises in urban and peri-urban areas. Alcohol is widely used amongst young people between the ages of 15 and 19, and this is very disturbing. And I think for those of you who might have not heard, but I'm sure many of you did hear about the 2016 data from South African National Demographic and Health Survey released by the South African Medical Research Council, at least 1 in every 4 young persons have consumed alcohol by the ages between 15 and 19. As if it is not enough, the 2011 Youth Risk Behavior Survey conducted amongst grade 8 to 11 learners in public schools found that half the learners ever consumed alcohol. About a quarter already of them had engaged in binge drinking in the 30 days prior to the survey. If it is not regulated and used responsibly, alcohol accounts for harms to individuals and society, as it is one of the major contributors of burden of diseases in South Africa. The study conducted in 2018 supports this statement, as it reflects that in 2015, about 62,300 people died from alcohol-attributed causes in South Africa, which is just over 170 persons a day. Overall, South Africa has very high rates of hazardous alcohol consumption among drinkers, and these rates of hazardous drinking appear to be on the rise. Ladies and gentlemen, I am of the view that many families have been fragmented because of alcohol abuse or excessive alcohol usage, and left many people, including children, desolate, working and living on the streets. And I think that we can go to some research on the work that we did during COVID-19, where because of the regulations that were there, where people could not easily access alcohol, the hospitals spoke to less people coming to hospitals because of weekend parties where people end up bashing each other, because people were unable to access alcohol that easily. So it meant that the trauma centers in the hospitals had less people being brought to the trauma centers. But I also think that a lot is being said about alcohol and how it affects society. We could now deliberate on solutions to this societal problem of alcohol, which has over the years destroyed the dreams and aspirations of many. Exploring solutions should not be informed by emotions, but what the 3-day program has in store for us. The conference plenary sessions will be reflecting and deliberating on investing in people before profits and building a framework convention on alcohol control and alcohol pricing policies. Government's responsibility and accountability must not be taken lightly, because one way or the other, we must reach amicable solutions with the industries responsible for manufacturing and the sales of alcohol. In terms of the law-making process, and I heard Bongi again referring to the importance of lawmakers themselves and getting closer to the lawmakers, our legislative structures need to also work jointly regardless of political differences, to regulate the digital marketing of alcohol and find new initiatives of promoting impactful policies and reducing. This process may, in the process, create tension and conflict in the interest between government and the industry, but working in unison in the interest of the country's well-being would save current and future generations against alcohol abuse. When I arrived in the department, obviously being a Minister of Social Development, you get a lot of the industry people approaching us, the Department of Health, the Department of Social Development, for us to have a conversation and engage. And I was in deep conflict at the beginning because I immediately said, no, why don't we come and sit around the table? And the department said, no, Minister, you can't do that right now. Let's have a conversation before you do that. We can speak about statistics from various researchers, journals, and technical documents from academia. However, being solution-orientated would assist in finding solutions for the benefit of our respective countries. Educational and informative sessions with the citizens can also yield positive results through information sharing. Many children are born with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, which has long-term negative effects on unborn babies when mothers should take alcohol during pregnancy. This disorder affects children's physical and mental capability, as alcohol intake by pregnant mothers destroys a fetus inside the womb. After birth, prenatal drinking can lead to child abuse and numerous impacts on the child's social, psychosocial, and economic environment. The impact of drinking on family life can include mental health problems for other family members, such as anxiety, fear, and depression. There's also an issue of productivity in the workplace, wherein many companies and organizations lose billions of monies as some of their employees are unable to cope with working and excelling in a deadline and pressure-driven environment. Considering that we are living in countries with labor relation pieces of legislation in place, fundamental constitutional provisions, and a right-driven environment, it is always difficult for employers to find long-term solutions to deal with risk brought by employees who are struggling with alcohol. It is a fact that we have good policies which regulate employer-employee relations, but they should not be used as a weaponry against addressing impediments caused by abuse of alcohol. Government and the private sector spent a lot of money on rehabilitation of its employees who may be struggling with alcohol abuse and usage. The same applies to what government spends on compensating victims of road accidents caused by alcohol abuse and use on our roads. As economies globally are not doing well, this is the money that can be reinvested into provision of other societal incentives, such as social relief of distress for poverty-stricken communities. Alcohol has detrimental health effects because as an intoxicant, it affects a wide range of structures and processes in the central nervous system. The previous speaker also spoke to issues of cancer and all, and I think all these things must be considered at all times. Regions of the brain are disrupted by drug abuse, as the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, reports that the brainstem, limbic system, and cerebral cortex are all affected. The brainstem controls life-sustaining functions, including sleeping, breathing, and heart rate, while limbic systems holds the brain's reward circuitry and helps to control emotions and the ability to feel happiness. The cerebral cortex is considered the thinking center of the brain, managing problem solving, planning, and decision-making abilities, as well as helping people to process information provided by these senses. The more often drugs are used, the more they will impact brain chemical and circuitry, which can lead to drug dependency and withdrawal symptoms when the drug processes out of the body. The brain completes development at the age of 25. And if we talk about what I referred to earlier on, the drinking and the age at which young people are drinking now, so you can imagine what happens to their growth before they get to the age of 25. Especially binge drinking before the ages can impair cognitive development. The use of alcohol at an early age can be a predictor of harmful alcohol use in life. Delaying the onset of alcohol initiation is protective. If an individual is not alcohol dependent by 25, then they are likely to become dependent in the future. In the early initiation of alcohol is also associated with the substance abuse problems later in life, as youth binge drinkers are at a great risk of physical, emotional, and social harm. Therefore, we need to do more as government. And when I say we need to do more as government, it's not just one department. It is about all the departments coordinating together. And for us as a Department of Social Development, the Department of Health, the Department of Education, our department play a critical role, including the police at this point. We play a critical role if we act and work in a coordinated manner. Members of the academia, from an economic perspective, the negative impact of harmful alcohol consumption has also been documented in many ways and through various studies. It is important to highlight the importance of calculating the economic costs associated with alcohol consumption and the contribution it makes to informing alcohol management policies and laws. The literature further suggests that the costs associated with alcohol consumption are multifaceted. The misuse of alcohol manifests are generating an internal cost, which is the usage of the misuser's resources, and the external cost inflicted on others. I did refer to this earlier on, which is the usage of misusers' resources and the internal costs inflicted on others. Internal costs include higher medical expenses, increased insurance premiums, lower eligibility for loans, lower wages, lost employment opportunities, and high legal expenses for the person having lower or no alcohol consumption. Like I said earlier on, the bigger cost category is external costs, which include the labor costs associated with lower work productivity, absenteeism, unemployment, and early retirement. In 2009, a summary detailing both the internal and external costs attributable to alcohol in South Africa, divided into tangible and intangible costs, was estimated. During the same year, the final estimate was estimated at 246 to 289 billion rand annually, whilst tangible costs are in the region of 38 billion. Total tangible costs are much higher, and premature mortality and morbidity cost estimates are also higher. There's a strong evidence that young people who are exposed to alcohol advertising are most likely to initiate alcohol use earlier, consume more, and engage in binge drinking. Furthermore, there's evidence that exposure to alcohol advertising results in increased consumption levels for young people who are already heavy drinkers. According to a report prepared for NEDLEC by Genesis Analytics in 2017, recent estimates of the national economic cost of alcohol-related harm accounts for 0.5% to 1.3% of GDP, which amounts to 20 billion and 52 billion a year, and furthermore, alcohol-related health costs are 5% of a total public health spending. The alcohol harms in South Africa amongst young people are further acknowledged by the President Ramaphosa, who indicated that the increase in social acceptability of young people drinking has become a serious problem in the country. The President was relating this to what had happened in Enyobeni in the Eastern Cape Tavern in the Eastern Cape, where young people lost their lives And to date, we are still going through that pain, and to date, there's still investigation going on as to what exactly happened. And to date, parents are still struggling to come to terms with so many lives lost. But also, it's important for us to say, parents need to also take a greater responsibility for their children, because when you are at home and your 13-year-old and your 14-year-old is not at home at 12 midnight, is not at home at 2 o'clock, is not at home at 3 o'clock in the morning, something is not right there. Alcohol usage among adolescents is associated with impaired functioning, absenteeism from learning, and alcohol-related injuries, suicidal thoughts, and risky behaviors. And this risky behavior is something that we as the Department of Social Development are looking at connecting to communities about changing behavior. How do we work in ensuring that there's behavioral change? And I think that I made a small reference to the time of COVID-19 and when alcohol was not available. Actually, at that time, we were able to connect with communities, we were able to connect with churches, we were able to connect with NGOs about this issue. But unfortunately, COVID left and we seem to be back to our normal situations of working in silos and working in little corners. In conclusion, given the prevalence and magnitude of drinking in South Africa, it is not surprising that companies on the supply side of the alcohol market are powerful and influential. There was reference to this again, and there was an issue which was raised that part of what becomes a problem is corruption, and we need to deal with it in the best way that we can, because we cannot allow those that are powerful and having a greater influence in such a way that when even the policies are being developed, when legislation is being passed, is not influenced by the people but influenced by them. I can tell you, our government, the government of the African National Congress, will always want to listen more to the people and the challenges that are faced by the people than listen to those who are making profits. Implementing the Best Buy intervention would prevent 8.1 million premature deaths by 2030, and this represents a reduction of almost 15% of total premature mortality due to the non-communicable diseases, saving lives and spending less methodology by WHO. Ideally, interventions should be designed to minimize the social and economic costs of alcohol abuse while limiting the impact on the industry's generation of economic benefits. Regulatory and policy interventions have the potential to substantially curtail costs of harmful alcohol use, and in doing so, make a different contribution to the well-being of the average South African citizen and the economy. However, such regulations will only be effective if informed by good evidence provided by ongoing economic, social, and health research into effects of alcohol. And so we also speak a little bit about the achievements in the management of alcohol use in South Africa, and I think the department can also distribute this among the participants, but I just want to highlight the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa seeks to protect the rights of all people living in South Africa, including those affected and suffering from substance abuse disorder. The Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse Act 70 of 2008 and regulations that, amongst others, seek to provide for a comprehensive national response for the combating of substance abuse and to provide for mechanisms aimed at demand and harm reduction in relation to substance abuse through prevention and early intervention treatment. The National Drug Master Plan is a 5-year government program of action that focuses on supply and demand and harm reduction strategies, and it aims to realize drug-free South Africa. The Liquor Act 59 of 2003 seeks to establish national norms and standards in order to maintain economic unity within our communities. I'm hoping also that we have among us who are the people who are responsible for implementing the drug master plan, the Central Drug Authority. I hope they are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here's your gift. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, 1 minute and then you guys can get some tea. Thank you, Minister, for that presentation. I have a couple of announcements. We're running half an hour late, so we're not too bad. So we will reconvene at 11:30, but just if you'll bear with me for 1 minute. I've been asked about the Wi-Fi. There is Wi-Fi in this convention center. The username and password are the same, and the word is GAPC 2023, so it's not too difficult to remember that. I was also asked by someone about the program booklets, and you might not know there's actually a secret compartment in the back of this lanyard. So if you look in there, if you haven't found it already, and you've been wondering why everybody else has one and you don't, it's in the back of your lanyard. Also, you might have seen the plenaries are being recorded, and in fact, some of the plenaries are actually being broadcast on your DSD TV. So please be careful when you walk by the back, if you're walking by during a session, to not walk in front of the cameras. And two last points, just one last point. Cape Town is a beautiful city, but it's not without safety concerns. This area around here has lots of cameras which have closed circuit. People are watching them, so it's generally quite a safe area, but be careful when you're walking around with your valuables, and also particularly at night time. I think one needs to be a lot more cautious. So with that, I conclude our first session. Thank all our speakers and our chairs. And the Minister wants another word.
I'm just being reminded that I did not declare, so I need to declare the 7th Biannual Global Alcohol Policy Conference officially opened, and wish all policymakers, participants, to be very robust, and let's have fruitful discussions. Thank you.
On that note, you're adjourned. Thank you.